everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and I'm joining you from Southern Florida here in the United States. We welcome our global audience wherever it is you are. We're happy to have you here with us for our second episode of Food and Our Emotions. Our guest today has not arrived, so we will welcome the star of our show and have our conversation that is about breaking free from emotional eating. Our star is Mr. Red O'Loughlin. He's joining us from Texas in the United States, and he has a lot of expertise and experience when it comes to longevity and how we can live a fuller, richer life when we really get in touch with our chemistry at the cellular level. Let's see how I did on that. Let's welcome Red to the program. Hello.
You did exceptionally well, as always, Dr. JACALYN.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for getting up so early and joining me for this program. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the guests that come on that are either very early in the morning because they're in New Zealand or South Africa or Europe or whatever. So, a little bit of difference, for me is nothing compared to what the inconvenience is for some of the guests that have been on the show at almost midnight their time. So you do have a worldwide audience of attendees and guests and other hosts and stuff. So it's dedication to make sure everything works properly.
Yes, I appreciate that. We actually have had people join us at 2 or 3 in the morning for interviews too. It's just amazing. They stay up or get up in the middle of the night so they can share their story. But we're going to be talking today about food and emotional eating. And of course, I can share some of my experience. You can share some of yours. And one of my favorite topics is chocolate. I had given up chocolate for a long time. And then I would say in the last 2 months or so, I started eating a little bit of chocolate every day. And I love it, but I hate myself for doing it. And I think that that's where our emotions really come into play with that love-hate relationship with food. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background for people who are just joining us for the first time. And for those who don't know, you are the host of The Wise Ones. You're also an expert presenter on Talking Heads. Both of those shows will be on later today. And you recently joined our men's show that is hosted and moderated by Roland Friedel, and that is Wild at Heart Bonfire Talks, real, authentic, and uncut. Oh, sorry. Looked like you were going to sneeze for a second. Okay, you're going to. I'm moving down. All right. And Red is also one of our elevated listeners, and he is also my book coach. So together we have already released, I think it's 4 books. I forget, 3 or 4, with another one coming out actually on Saturday. Let's bring Red back. How are you doing?
Exceptionally well, as always.
Perfect. Can you share a little bit about your background with our audience?
Well, let's clarify yours first. You do have 4 books, and one of them is coming out on the 14th. So yes, you're absolutely correct about that. And 2 of them, you are the you are the Amazon #1 best-selling author. And 2 of your books, your children's books, are #1 first releases. They were #1 the minute they hit the stand. So that's a pretty good accomplishment for a first-time author, because a year ago we were just talking about doing a book, and here all of a sudden you have 4 of them done.
That's amazing. You've been so helpful, a true leader and a true partner in getting this done. And I also want to give credit to Mariska Duprier, who is my co-author on the children's books. So thank you for clarifying. All right, Red, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, many years ago, I fell in love with chemistry, sophomore in high school, and I got a degree in it and immediately got an invitation to Vietnam and never got a chance to practice chemistry. It turned out that Sunday afternoon, I said I do to the Navy with my best friend. He flunked, ended up 4F, never went in the military, and he was one who really wanted to be a pilot and never did. And then the following Wednesday, he was my best man at my wedding. So I said I do to the Navy on a Sunday evening, and I said I do to my wife the following Wednesday night. And ironically, we asked people for years and years and years if anybody knew anybody else to get married on a Wednesday night. And Dr. JACALYN, you wouldn't believe this, but we were reading a 50-year-old newspaper clipping that somebody had saved for my wife's parents. They got married at 5:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. And they're the only other couple that we know. Now, we got married on Wednesday because it was the day before 4th of July. That's why we did it. So we'd have the extra days of holidays from our work, regardless. Anyway, go ahead, many years, 31 years later, I retired from the military. I flew for 16 years. And then last year we celebrated our 54th wedding anniversary. But several years ago, my wife came down with breast cancer, and I started doing some research as to what's causing this. And I found out that the okay, there we go. I had something wrong with my screen for just a second. Now get back to normal. Good. The things that I found out was that my passion for chemistry returned. I was digging in at the cellular level in the body. Why does this happen? Why does that happen? What stops this from happening? What can I do about this? And so I started doing things, and many of them worked. And I was very pleased about that. The one thing I could not control very much of was fatigue. My wife was taking 1 or 2 or 3 2-hour naps a day, had no interest in eating whatsoever. And I discovered a book by Dr. Terry Walls, that's Wahls, called The Walls Protocol. And this was just at that point in time where she was finishing up chemo and starting radiation. And I decided to say, Marilyn, why don't you try this and see what happens? Because what it did was for somebody who late in life came down with MS and had a very severe case, ended up in a wheelchair for years, she put herself on her own protocol and was able to, in 3 months, get out of a wheelchair and walk using a walker. A month later, she was walking using a cane. And then by the end of the year, she's bicycling 18 miles. And I said, it can't hurt. And lo and behold, we started the first day of radiation. Radiologist told us her fatigue would probably get worse. All the other side effects from the chemo drugs and things that she was doing, we kind of had under control. It wasn't too bad. But fatigue was one. Anyway, 48 hours later, she didn't have fatigue. 7 days after we started radiation, she volunteered at the church where she had been before. The last day of radiation, we left Houston, drove to Jacksonville, Florida, about 1,000 miles. I rented a U-Haul. She followed me by herself 500 miles each day to bring back my parents' estate stuff. And for somebody 48 hours after the last radiation treatment, that was amazing. And what changed? Literally her diet. There was 4 things in the Walls protocol, of which diet is number 1. And the part about the diet that was important was that it filled you with all of the nutrients the body needs. So we talk about breaking free from emotional eating, that maybe sometimes we're eating too much of something or maybe too little of something. And in my wife's case, it was way too little of a lot of things. So food is very, very important. It affects us in so many different ways. We end up with a little bit too little vitamin B1, B3. We end up with a high risk of depression or anxiety. Too little B12 for a long period of time, it mimics Alzheimer's. There's just a lot of things in the nutrients that we get out of our foods. But I take that, I research the human body, I write about it, I speak about it on the show here on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. There's a show called Talking Heads later on this afternoon at 2 o'clock Central Time. I'll be talking again, and today we're talking on toxins. It's day number 2 out of 6 that we're talking on that field. And it's one of those things that I have a passion about. Ask me, something about nutrition, and literally I'll build you a watch to answer the question, because it's something that I really and truly love. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our good doctor, and let's go ahead and figure out what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, fantastic. So thanks for sharing that, Red. A topic that I'd like to talk about is when we're upset, we eat. When we're happy, we eat. When we're celebrating, we eat. When we're crying, we eat. And it seems like food is at the center of everything that we do. And we have to make decisions every day about how we're going to eat and when we're going to eat. And as I shared a little bit with you, now that I'm eating chocolate again, I really enjoy it. While I'm eating it, I allow myself that enjoyment. But then I think to myself, how much more exercise I'm going to have to get to do in order to burn off those calories, which has nothing to do with putting the sugar in my body. So then there's the guilt about the sugar and the worry about and it just goes on and on and on. So I think it's almost impossible. Like when I wasn't eating any sugar, I did it, but I think I was kind of angry about it because I wasn't able to have what I wanted to have. So I know people very closely who don't care about any of it. They're going to eat whatever they want. They've been doing it for years. That's just the way that it's going to be. And they don't have any guilt about it. So where is it that we should be on this spectrum of acceptance, guilt, dread, anger, enjoyment, all the emotions that are attached to it?
Okay, well, let me ask you a simple question. Why do you eat? Okay. Most people eat because they need nourishment for the body, but that's not what we think about when we're eating. We're thinking about how do we look? We don't want that extra couple inches around the middle. We don't want, things that detract from our appearance. But in reality, we should be eating for. I spoke yesterday at the Chamber of Commerce meeting here in Houston, and I talked about a dozen different ways, little leverages of things that people you get down, almost lose everything, and then almost you can't get those last few pounds off. Or some people they just can't even get the first pound off. And there's little things that happen in our bodies that when we're 20 and 30, we can generally take care of. We get to our 40s and 50s, things we notice are changing. We say, oh, we have a slower metabolism. But you start getting into your 50s and 60s and 70s, all of a sudden, things that worked 30 years ago don't work anymore because there's just so many things interrelated. But we also look at our mindset. When we're eating, we eat for what has some level of pleasure. Sometimes you mentioned earlier, we celebrate, we have things, we get sad, whatever. We have our comfort zones, and our go-to is spaghetti and meatballs, or pie, or whatever that may happen to be. And so we eat to celebrate, but we don't eat in moderation. It's like that chip, can't eat just one. Well, that's true. There's the what is the commercial about pay me now or pay me later.
Hmm.
Because that second, yeah, the first one, yeah, it's no problem. And when I was on Atkins for a number of years, I noticed that I could have anything I wanted, anytime I wanted, as much as I wanted, if I did it once. So if I was living in Germany at the time, I'd been on Atkins for a couple of years. I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful diet. I had a problem with the fact that I did not understand body chemistry at that time. This is back in the 90s. And I came back from Germany, retired from the military, and I decided I have a chance to get my bone density test. I'd been a weightlifter for years, run all sorts of things all over for decades. And I thought I had some pretty strong bones. Well, it turned out I was osteopenia, but I didn't understand what it took to get calcium into the bones, which is difficult, not impossible, but difficult. But it's almost impossible to get to keep calcium from leaving the bones unless you understand the dynamics of what actually occurs. And so I found out that yeah, I was osteo. I happened to be in acidosis, and my body was leaching calcium from my bones in order to maintain a blood pH. But when we're looking at our emotional eating, our emotions are triggered by our brain, serotonin levels and all sorts of stuff there. But that food, let's take chocolate. That chocolate has that, just makes it feel so good. It's like that ice cream you taste, and it's just so unctuous, so velvety. So I mean, there's just some foods, the taste, the sugar, the 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 feeling it gives you, that little bit of a high. Those are things that just make us calm down. But the real question is, are we eating for health, or are we eating to look good, or are we eating in some cases to be able to do certain things? Well, I think you'll agree with me, Dr. JACALYN, that most of us don't eat for health. We just eat because of habit. We eat because it's there. It's what we have time for. We don't really plan things well in advance to say, okay, this is what I need to have all of my nutrients today. And it's not that difficult. It really isn't. If you took a look at Dr. Terry Wall's food regimen, it's a fairly simple one. She says 3 meals a day for those people who can eat 3 meals a day. And we found out, my wife and I, we could barely eat one and a half of her meals. But the first part of her meal is leafy green vegetables, all different kinds. When we did it, was about 7 or 8 different kinds of leafy green vegetables. 1 cup. That's not much. Then the second part of her 4-part program on her eating is colored fruits and vegetables, where the color goes all the way through the entire plant. So in other words, you're thinking something like a blueberry, not an eggplant. So you get the phytonutrients from those foods that are red and purple and orange and yellow and green, etc. But you're looking at fruits and vegetables that have a lot of color to it. The third one, and this is one that I happen to not like a lot, and that's your cruciferous vegetables, because there's a lot of sulfur in there, and the sulfur is needed for our bodies to repair everything. But I love garlic, I love onions, I love mushrooms, I love a lot of other things. There are a lot of other options that provide sulfur to me. And so I would take those, and rather than a cup of those, I'd take a half a cup because I'd saute them. Then the last thing you need is some level of protein. And if you're doing that with any kind of saute, it's a half a cup rather than a full cup. So I changed. The only thing I changed was that I changed my protein. Every 48 hours, I had different proteins. So if I happened to have, say, hamburger and salmon in one day, the next day I would have chicken and pork. So I would just change things out so I would not have repeat the same protein 2 days in a row. Now that gave me literally all the nutrients that I needed. Now, because I was choosing my foods unwisely when I was in Atkins, because it's a very similar diet. You didn't hear me talk about any kind of carbohydrates at all. When I was on Atkins, I was less than 10 grams a day and happy as could be. But when you're on a low carbohydrate diet, it automatically forces you into a ketones as a fuel choice. And this might be one of those things that for some people, you're not getting that little bit of feeling that tastes good from the food you have, because we don't have that. I mean, I didn't have a problem with any kind of food when I was on Atkins for 6 years, except bread. I thought I was going to have a problem with pasta because I love pasta. But bread was one of those ones I had a really difficult time eliminating from my diet. But I found that if I decided to go, I was living in Germany, I'd go down and have a really nice meal somewhere in town or with friends, big pasta dinner with bread and everything. A single meal didn't do anything. But if I had 2 or 3 or 4 meals, it made a big difference. I would go down, well, maybe once every other month to Italy and spend a weekend down there. And I would go down on a Friday, come back on a Sunday night, and I'd find out that if I pigged out on pasta and bread and everything else that I could possibly get, I'd gain 12 pounds over the weekend, all water weight gain. 2 weeks later, I'm back to my normal weight. So there's a certain thing about the carbohydrates that satisfies us, but it also changes our fuel source to blood glucose, which activates insulin. And then you have issues there. If you happen to be I know your job's not very stressful, Dr. JACALYN, but some people are stressed out a little bit more. And then you start getting the cortisol mixed in with that, with adrenaline, and sometimes estrogen levels change and other hormones are going back and forth. Nothing happens independently of everything else. And so when we're eating, if our thought pattern is, I want to be healthy, I want to be healthy now, I want to be healthy when I'm in my 60s and 70s and 80s, where I can do whatever I want. Maybe one of the trade-offs is that I need to change not my eating habits, but my lifestyle, which dictates my eating habits. Does that make sense?
Yes, it definitely makes sense for sure. And I think if somebody were cooking for me, if somebody were preparing a meal, I would eat extremely healthy. But I find because I don't have any time, and it's not like I don't really have the time. It's like people say, I really don't have the time to be cooking meals and cleaning up. So therefore, I started purchasing prepared food it's made there at the place, so there aren't any preservatives in it. They have, expiration dates and whatever, but it has things in it that I would never be eating otherwise, like mayonnaise, for example. I didn't eat mayonnaise. I'd have tuna just right out of the packet, or fresh tuna. No tuna with mayonnaise and egg salad. It's not good, but that's what I'm doing because it fits in with the amount of time that I have, and I'm still getting the protein, but there's also fat in there. And then of course when you add in the sugar, so it's just not a great situation, and I'm not happy with myself about it. over the summer I had been ill and I lost 10 pounds. And of course, I was really happy with how I looked, but I hated myself because I wasn't eating the foods that I wanted to eat. So it's just that's the emotional part of it. It's like a roller coaster. And at some point, I just would like to be able to say, I'm happy with how I am, I'm healthy, and I'm enjoying my life. So,
Well,
good.
I think you've kind of hit on the front edge of this emotional eating thing, because what happens is we diet. You know, we eat this for a while, we end up gaining a couple pounds, we change our eating habits, we go back down, we increase our exercise to burn off that extra little amount we. So we're not on a lifestyle, we're not on something where we really and truly have the foods we need nutritionally, nutritional balance, caloric restriction. I mentioned this a long time ago, and I know you adopted it. Just to cut back on foods, we talk about anything in moderation is fine. Well, use a salad plate rather than a big plate. You're automatically cutting down a third of the calories you had. And what they found out from laboratory animals is that you cut back 30% of the food that animals are eating, they live longer and they don't have near the same problems of other animals that are fed the normal diets they have their whole lives, because you're living right there on that brink of starvation to a degree, but your body doesn't care because it loves what you're doing. I've mentioned it before in other shows. In our brain, we have a little connection between our gut, which is our second brain, and our primary brain. And so you get hunger because of ghrelin, another hormone there. And anyway, you get this ghrelin urge, I'm hungry. Well, are you really hungry? Or is it a habit? Or are you dehydrated? All of those are very similar feelings. But that feeling that goes to the brain is, I need to eat. Okay, now you start eating, food's getting in the stomach, and now another chemical is getting involved, leptin. So we have insulin being created the same time as the food is being processed. Leptin is being signaled to the brain saying, hey, I got enough. And there's actually a physical feeling you can actually, between the brain and your gut, somewhere about halfway between the beginning of the meal and somewhere toward the middle, the end of the meal, maybe a little bit on the front end, a little bit on the back end. If you were to actually honestly assess yourself, you'd say, okay, I'm fine. I don't need any anymore. But there's food on the plate. And if it's a restaurant, you don't want to waste it. So you take it home, you eat it later, or you eat it then. And a lot of times, when your parents, you say, eat all of it, it's on the flip. You don't. My dad used to be very good about saying, eat it or wear it. But that was one of those expressions from way back when. But the thing is, we eat, but we don't listen to our bodies. And so we overeat that little bit of extra. Now, if you were going to have a piece of chocolate, well, the chocolate in and of itself is not the enemy. But if you were to break that bar down into 8 pieces, well, 2 things. Number one, just taking a single deal and just savoring it in your mouth and letting it melt, and you spend 2 whole minutes just holding a thing there and just feeling that thing just kind of just glide down the throat. You're really enjoying what you're eating. Most of us don't enjoy what we're eating. We don't chew it enough. We don't recognize the different textures, the actual different flavors that are in there. But that one, if I'm telling myself I'm having 1 piece of chocolate today, and that's going to be my reward for whatever, doesn't matter what that little reward is, but we recognize ourselves incrementally. That's it. The rest of those other 7 just sit there until tomorrow and look at them. That's fine. They're the rest of the week. But we don't. We'll have that whole thing. Just like that 1 chip. You taste that 1 chip, the texture, the salt, whatever it may happen to be, a little bit of the sugar and the carbohydrate. And we need another one. We need another one. We need another one. So we don't control. We don't have a lifestyle that recognizes that, hey, if I keep this up, I'm going to be in my late 40s, late 50s. I'm going to have an extra 7 inches around my gut, and I'm not going to be able to do things I used to do back in when I was in my 20s. And then that leads into, now you're getting into your late 50s, 60s, 70s, and you have diabetes, you have congestive heart issues, you have other things, and you can't do anything you used to do. And so if our goal in eating is to be healthy, not to look good, but to be healthy, and if you're eating properly, you probably accomplish both of them. One is going to be a subset of the other, but you want to be healthy so that, when you turn 75 or 85, you're out there on the golf course or the tennis court or wherever it may happen to be, and you're still doing everything you used to do, maybe not 100%, but you're doing it. And other people who are the same age can't get off the couch or they can't get out of their walker. It's just, we have to look at the long term. And when you look at age-related diseases that can creep in, so many of them are dependent on the foods that we choose to eat when we're in our 30s and 40s, that we make habits, and that's all we eat the rest of our lives, because we don't eat those other things that have the phytonutrients, the minerals, the vitamins, the enzymes, et cetera, that we need.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I think part of the reason why it's confusing to me is because I have a family member who eats a ton of sugar and has been doing so for decades and can still go out and, walk several miles. And so I guess it just depends on your genes.
Genes are 5% generally. Now, in some places they might be a little bit more, but genes are like light switches. You can turn a light switch on or off. Well, if it's a good gene, you want to turn it on. If it's a bad gene, you want to turn it off. Now, you have genes for Alzheimer's, you have genes for breast cancer, you have genes for colon cancer, you have genes for everything. But you also have genes for the good things in life. And so you turn on as many of the good genes as you can, you turn off as many of the bad genes as possible. But the genes are turned on and off by your lifestyle, the food choices, the amount of calories, the exercise, the stress management, the sleep, those things that we do every single day that manage our body. We are actually controlling the light switches that go on and off. And so, yes, you may have a predilection for Alzheimer's, but if that gene is never turned on, chances are you're either going to shove that risk out to your 95 years of age, or you're not going to get it at all. It's like COVID. You may have COVID, but you never even knew you had it because there's no symptoms. So those are things that we need to look at from a genetic perspective. Yeah, those things are there, but we have some level of control. But if we start and we know we're predisposition, say, for breast cancer or Alzheimer's, or you pick the issue, and we constantly overeat, and in our 40s we have an extra 7-8 inches around our gut, uh, and we're not exercising anymore, and we're stressed out, and we just have terrible sleep, and we sit there and have an extra couple, 3 or 4 glasses of wine before you go to bed. Our whole lifestyle has changed to make the end of our life lower quality. And I think most of us, honestly, I mean, my dad used to say all the time that one of his biggest fears in life was dying. To me, I think a much bigger fear is having somebody change your diaper for the last 5 years of your life. That's a quality of life we don't want. We're burdening somebody else. And when you're burdening somebody else, that's something we don't want. And it's one of those things that has some level of control, but you got to control it 3 decades earlier. And that's where that habit of having the lifestyle that says, I'm satisfied with the foods I'm eating. I'm satisfied with the level of exercise. I don't have to go in and do an extra day of exercise because what I'm doing is adequate for what I need. And you can usually tell your stress levels. One of the easiest ways, if you go to sleep at night and you're constantly thinking of something that's keeping you awake, you're stressed. Most people say, well, I don't get stressed. Well, everybody gets stressed. And the problem with stress is that the adrenaline, the cortisol, cortisol loves to store fat, loves to store it around your middle. We have fat around our organs. We have fat around our gut, our subcutaneous fat. We have fat in our liver. And the fat in the liver is one that creates a lot of problems because the liver takes care of all our toxins, takes care of all of the activity that goes on with just so many things in the liver. There's a thing called TUDCA, TUDCA, that is a good liver chemical that you take this. It's about $30 for a bottle. It's not very much, but it's exceptionally good to get rid of some of that fat around the liver, in the liver. And there's a lot you hear about cirrhosis. Well, most of the time the cirrhosis is because of alcohol abuse over time. But with our high fructose corn syrup, we're getting fructose in levels never imagined before. And fructose, like alcohol, is interpreted by the body as a poison. Everything stops. Your digestion stops until you get rid of all that alcohol. Well, the same thing happens with the fructose. But that fructose actually causes what they call non-fatty, liver disease. And it's a problem that can be addressed very easily. Just cut way back on your sugar drinks. Look at what has fructose in it, and just really, moderation. But now another thing is really, really good. I'm not talking about a detox. I'm just talking about something that helps the liver get rid of that extra fat around it, which sometimes is all it's needed to get that extra 10 or 15 pounds off that you just can't never get off. But choline, it's again fairly inexpensive, about half the price of TETCA on a supplemental level, and it does wonders in the body for the liver. So if you're looking at doing something, from a supplemental perspective, TUDCA, TUDCA, or choline, CHOLINE, are two really good things that help our liver. Because when you hear the deal, well, eat 4 or 5 or 6 small meals a day. Well, what happens is the sugar spikes up at the first meal and starts to come back down. By the time you have the second meal, it's back up again. And as it starts to come, it's back up again. You never have a chance for the body to relax. The liver is working overtime. So if you're eating, say, from an intermittent fasting perspective, or you're only eating within a 4-hour or 6-hour window, the body now has 16, 18, 20 hours to digest the food, to process everything. And now you go to sleep and the body can actually repair itself properly. And so it's like I say, when I looking at the issue of how do I get calcium into my bones, how do I keep it there? Keeping it there is harder than getting it there, because everything, the rest of what we do for our eating regimens dictate whether the calcium stays there or not. And the bad part about some deficiencies is I can get calcium into my blood. Well, let me just take a moment, because we have the time to do it right this second. You want calcium to get to your bones, you have to have some kind of food that has a lot of calcium in it. Or if you take a pill, make sure it's not calcium carbonate, because that's very difficult to get into digestion, into the availability in your body. But let's say you're having some leafy green vegetables that have calcium. You also need magnesium, which leafy green vegetables have some of that too. So the magnesium helps the calcium become available to the body. As it's leaving the stomach, going through the duodenum, if you have enough vitamin D3, it gets pulled into the bloodstream. If not, it ends up in the toilet. Now you have calcium in the bloodstream, and it's going to go to two places. It's going to go to your bones, or it's going to go to your heart valves and arteries as plaque. Well, if you have enough vitamin K2, it'll go to your bones. If you don't, now you're building a plaque in your heart valves and arteries. But now it's in the bones. If you're living in an acidosis environment, your body is acidic, then it's going to be leaching calcium out of the bones to maintain the pH of the blood. Now, what causes your body to be acid or acidic? Well, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, metabolism, the things that we do every day, the foods we choose. What causes it to be alkaline? And the blood needs to be at 7.4 plus or minus 0.05. It needs fruits and vegetables, because those are the things that make our bodies alkaline. So if I'm sitting there and I took a look at the Wahls protocol, I'm having leafy green vegetables, I'm having colored fruits and vegetables, I'm having sulfur-laden vegetables, and a little bit of protein, 3 or 4 ounces at a meal. Well, I'm overdoing the proteins and fruit. I mean, I'm overdoing the vegetables and fruits compared to my proteins. So my body is naturally going to be alkaline, and as such, the calcium is not going to be extracted from the bones. And so those are things that if we understand what's going on, it makes our food choices a lot easier, because, okay, I know now that if I'm eating this and it becomes a habit, because that's the lifestyle I choose, yeah, I may not be up and down on my mood swings because I can't celebrate as much as somebody else, or I really want that chocolate bar or whatever, you pick it. We know that we're eating for 20 years from now to be really in excellent health, that we can do whatever we want, versus a temporary pleasure, which a lot of us happen to have that mindset that, immediate need for gratification. I'm sure you run into people like that, Dr. JACALYN.
Absolutely. You bring up a lot of really good points, Red. Thank you. I'm wondering, when we talk about TUDCA or we talk about supplements, how do we know if we can just take this supplement? That's like, is there anything we need to know about the supplements we put into our bodies? Is one thing not go with another?
Okay, let's take something that has vitamin A in it. Just pick A, whatever it may happen to be. when you're eating the food, there's a lot of other cofactors that go with it. Yeah, they extract out the individual. Well, not acetaminophen, the aspirin was made from white from the bark of a white willow tree or something. Trying to think of the name. Acetylsalicylic acid. Well, when you extract it out in a chemical lab, you're only getting that particular molecule. Well, molecules made in a chemistry lab have a tendency to be left-handed or right-handed. And when you're looking at certain things, I know on vitamin C that if you get a lot of left-handed vitamin C, it's not as good for you as if you get almost all right-handed vitamin C. It's the way the structure is made. They're mirror images of each other. So when they're made chemically in a manufacturing process, you're getting about a 50-50 mixture. But in the plant, you're getting all of one kind. But you're also getting the fiber and some of the other nutrients that go with it. And so when you're buying a food group, now I generally do two chemical supplements. Number one is vitamin K2. Now, vitamin K2 I do for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to have the K2 in my body because I have some level of blockage in my arteries, and the MK4, the monoquinone 4, in vitamin K2 can extract the calcium out of my heart valves and arteries. Now, I don't have a heart problem with the heart valves, but I have one artery that's blocked, and this is a long-term program the next couple of years that I'm going to look at personally trying to extract the calcium so I can increase that level. But I also want to keep the calcium away from my heart, and I want it going into the bones. So vitamin K2, typically you get some from vitamin K1 leafy green vegetables, but the body doesn't convert as much as you need. And I'm looking for both the monoquinone 4 and the 7. Those are the two. The 4 is the fast-acting one. The 7 is the longer lasting one. And so I'm going to take a vitamin K2 every day or more. I'm also going to take vitamin E. There's 8 different chemicals that make up vitamin E. You have 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienols. And each one of those has a benefit. Now, when you get the synthetic version, you're getting one, and it's a synthetic vitamin E, and it's literally worthless. It doesn't do anything in the body. But one of the tocotrienols, I think it's the alpha one, if you literally have that much in your brain, in your body, chances are if you have a stroke, you're not going to have any side effects from it. They found that there are certain things called autogenesis. I think it's what it is. Anyway, in our brains, we have a lot of, let's call them collapsed blood vessels. And you get a blockage, all of a sudden, if that chemical there, that alpha tocotrienol, it will actually force those blood vessels to open up and go around that blockage. So you end up with little to any difficulty with regard to oxygen starvation in the brain. Now, in my heart, I have a blockage, 100% blockage, but my heart grew 2 brand new blood vessels, one from the upper part of my heart down across the front, down to the blockage, one across the back of my heart down to the blockage, where when they did a catheterization, they said, I don't need a stent because my heart already has done a double DIY, double bypass on its own. So there was no need for that. And so there's things that the body can do. But if you don't know that I need that alpha tocotrienol to minimize any stroke potential for the rest of my life, well, there's an issue there that I need to include those. But it's difficult to get all 8. You can't get it in any single food, but you can get them. And if you, well, maybe I don't, let me just take the pill and not worry about it. So if you're going out to buy vitamin E, buy the one that's the for the mixed tocopherols and mixed tocotrienols. Same thing with vitamin B12. They'll give you if B12 is in a pill and you're swallowing it, that's not the B12 you want. You want the B12 you put under your tongue because it gets into your bloodstream rapidly, and that's the one you want. Otherwise, the cobalamin cannot pass through stomach acid and do you any good at all. And I'm noticing we've been talking for almost 40 minutes, Dr. JACALYN.
I know, it's incredible. What if we just get one a day vitamin and just, will that help us?
It's the same thing. If your B12 is in your one a day and you think you're getting your B12, over time, you're going to become deficient in B12 if you're not getting it from another source. So the whole thing is get your nutrition from your foods and supplement on those 1 or 2 or 3 items that you know you're not getting because of your food choices.
Right, right.
That's what I do. I try to do that.
And I had shared with you that when I had my blood tests, I was deficient on vitamin D. So I now take a vitamin D supplement, and vitamin D is also in the one a day vitamin. So it's hard to know how much
Vitamin
D is.
D can, it actually is one of those ones, if you trace it going from the skin through everything and you trace it down into liver and kidneys and back out again. And vitamin D, I take 20,000 IUs a day. If you listen to the experts and they say take 2,000 or 1,000, I've done that and I've had my blood tested. I can't get my blood levels up where my vitamin D3 levels are even at the bottom of the line. It used to be 20 nanograms per milliliter was the minimum. Now it's 30, but you'll still find a lot of references out there saying 20. But if you're really wanting good health, you want your vitamin D at least at 50 nanograms per milliliter. If you have cancer and you're treating some other kind of disease, you want at least 80. I keep, when my wife was going through her chemo, I was keeping hers at around the 90 to 100 level. I try to keep mine at the 90 to 100 level normally. And most of the time I was. I think the last time I had it checked, I was 106. But I keep mine high. It used to be in the summertime, I'd lower it to 10,000. Wintertime, I'd up it up to 20,000. But for somebody to OD on vitamin D, it's very, very difficult. People with MS have been known to supplement 50,000 a day, and it almost makes their MS symptoms go away. I know one guy who takes 100,000 a day because he has a genetic problem, and that's what the doctors are working on for that. Vitamin D is needed throughout the body. It's used up a lot, and most people don't get enough of it because when we go outside, we wear long sleeve shirts, we put a hat on, we put sunblock on. We're getting everything we can do to minimize the sun on our skin where we really need that level of sun. And in the wintertime, with everything else going on, so over day after day after day, we're not getting that vitamin D.
You just hit the nail on the head. I know when I'm able to go for walks, which is usually 4 times a week, I'm all covered up. I look like I'm going to Antarctica or something because I don't want to worry about getting skin cancer. So I think there's that trade-off. And even you're, protecting your scalp by wearing a hat because otherwise, who knows what's going on there?
I wear a hat most of the time, but if I'm out walking my wife and we're going a couple 3 miles, I'll take it off periodically and just keep it off for 5 minutes at a time because I want that sunlight. You have a couple things happening with the sun. You have the ultraviolet rays that can affect the skin and end up with cancer down the road. But again, it's moderation. But more importantly, you want that infrared radiation to penetrate. I mean, it's going to penetrate through our skin and our hat and everything else, but you want that infrared radiation nearer the lower end of the spectrum infrared because it goes down your spinal column through your spinal fluid, ends up in literally every cell in the body. It's needed. It's such a good thing to have. IR infrared saunas are probably one of the best things going because it gives our bodies things that we don't typically get because we just avoid the sun. But sunshine, again, moderation. If you're going to be out and you know that if you go out and you play tennis and 2 hours you're going to be sunburned, well, maybe you can do everything in an hour and be fine. If I'm out playing golf, I'll wear a sunblock. I actually wear coconut oil as a sunblock, and I'll put it on about every 4 holes because it's something that it's good for me, and it does a pretty decent job of blocking the sun, believe it or not.
Wow, you've given us so many wonderful tips today. Thank you, Red.
Well, you just asked the right questions.
No, I'm always learning from you. So I really do appreciate that. Can you please share a little bit as we close out with our audience about the 2 shows later today that you'll be starring in?
We have a show coming up at 1 o'clock Central Time, and it's called The Wise Ones on the USA Radio, on the USA TV and Radio Network. And our guest today is Robin Braley, I believe. He is an expert speaker. He also does non-linguistic body language. He's been involved in so many things in his life. I expect him to be a super guest today on our show. At 2 o'clock Central today on Talking Heads, I'll be talking part 2 on toxins and what we really need to know about them. And it's such a large area. I was going to write a book once on it, and I started getting so much information that it's really about 6 different books if you want to do it justice. So I'm trying to take the toxins and say, what are they? How do we know about them? What they do to us? How can we avoid them? And so that's what we talk about there.
All right. Thank you so much, Red. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who is watching or listening on the live or the replay. Red, how can people get in touch with you?
Easiest way is through my website, redolaughlin.com. Red, like the color, R-E-D, O'Laughlin, OLAUGHLIN. So it's REDOLAUGHLIN.com. My banner there has my contact information, and I respond rapidly to phone calls, the old fashioned voice method, or email. Those are the two ways that I do most of my business.
All right. Thank you so much, Red. I wish you a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in a few hours.
I look forward to it. Take care.
You too. Bye. And once again, thank you everybody who's watching or listening. Just a few announcements before we close out in case you're not aware. We do live stream 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and we are always interested in hearing your story. So if you would like to be a guest on our shows, please go over to our website, which is usaglobaltv.com, and look for Book Your Session. Just go ahead and scroll down and find a show title that resonates with you, your mission, your work, and go ahead and register. All of the times on the website are in the Eastern time zone. So go ahead and add whatever number of hours to wherever it is you are in the world. Okay, we have two exciting things happening this weekend. The first is our next book launch, which I will bring up the image. It's under the series name, The Amazing Adventures of Lady Ella, the Listening Mentor. And this is our book here on the right, as you can see it, The Amazing Adventures of Lady Ella, the Listening Mentor. This book came out in December and immediately became an Amazon #1 new release. All of the animal characters on the book cover represent real people who have taken the Power of Listening course to become an elevated listener, and they are on our team here at USA Global TV and Radio. If you'd like to be one of our team members, it's very easy. I'll put up the graphic for the course, and you can go over to thinkific.com and you can take the Power of Listening, which is a 2-hour online course. You will get a certificate, and that certificate will be displayed on drjacalyn.com. And also your headshot will be on drjacalyn.com and usaglobaltv.com as one of our team members. The course is $39. It's 2 hours. You can take it at your leisure. And then, of course, we will do our best to promote you on all of our platforms. So if you're interested, that's an information. So back to the book. The second book in the series is coming out on Saturday. It's called Lady Ella's ABCs of Listening. And these two books are 2 of 7, 5 more to come. And they're all focused on teaching children and their families how to listen at an elevated level. This book takes place at the School of Joy, and you can see the animal characters here on the book cover, also representing real people who have taken the power of listening. So right now you can go over to Amazon and you can put in my name, Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and you will see these 2 books, The Amazing Adventures of Lady Ella, the Listening Mentor, which is also the name of the series. It's available now in ebook, paperback, and in hardback. The book on the right is available for pre-order up until Saturday, when both the paperback and the hardback, and I should say the ebook, they will all be available for purchase, but you can pre-order today. Our third book is coming out March the 26th. Lady Ella Has Afternoon Tea in London, and this takes place at the British School of Excellence. And again, all the animal characters here represent real people who have taken the power of listening. And then finally, on Sunday, we have our 1-year anniversary. Hard to believe it's been a year since USA Global TV and Radio started out, and we have 5 hours of live streaming information. We also have entertainment with Big Scott, who will be our DJ. And I will be hosting this event with Mr. Alcini. And then each hour we will have four people, four of our guests from 2022, who will be sharing information about their work and the value that they bring. So wherever it is you typically watch us, you'll be able to see that starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. All of our shows, all of our programming, you can watch on our YouTube channel, which is USA Global TV. And if you are on that right now, we ask that you would just subscribe so you're aware of all of our programming. We typically have about 25 live shows each week. Thank you again for being here. I really do appreciate it. We'll be back in a couple of hours with the Corner Bookstore, and we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, take care, and remember, be kind to yourself and to others. Bye for now.